All right, Gridiron 360, we back talking free agency in the NFC North, and we are moving on to the Minnesota Vikings. They currently sit at number 26th out of 32 in this year's upcoming 2020 NFL Draft. They sit at number 32 of 32 teams in terms of salary cap, $1.3 million. Now, you were just making mention this does not take into account the money that is on the books for these players that are free agents for them.
That'll be coming off this week.
So, for instance, Everson Griffin at the top of the list, their defensive end, he has got $14.5 million on his tab there, and so there's room. But that's a really great player.
Yeah, but the other thing that's interesting to me is I think we've looked at the first handful of teams we've looked at. When you get down to their second, third, and fourth and fifth guys, you're still getting guys in that, some at $8 million, some at $7 million, some at $6 million. Their number 2 contract coming off the books is Trey Waynes, another important piece to them in the secondary at corner, especially given the fact that belief is they're going to cut Xavier Rhodes, which they'll get some relief there because he's got a good number on him too. He's only at $3 million. So
there's
with
quite
this
a drop off.
Yeah, they're not going to get as much clearance as maybe you would think. And again, remember, this is a team that's got a quarterback that's got a fully guaranteed. What was his deal? Was it $75 million?
Yeah,
it was
something
at least,
insane.
It was 25 or more. That's fully guaranteed. So he is a massive hit if they were to cut him this year, which I don't think that's the intent. But he also comes off the books next year. And what's your option B? Are you going to start tagging the guy because that number is going to be huge and that? So they've got that. They've had to pay up on their 2 receivers.
Yep.
So they got in Stephon Diggs and our boy that bombed this year
Thielen.
for me, Thielen. Oh.
So right now, the way we look at it, they have, based on what they have for free agents, and we'll go over that. We think that they're going to probably be in the market for some defensive line,
particularly edge rush,
yep. Secondary, particularly in the cornerback position, maybe tight end because Kyle Rudolph is solid, but getting a little long in the tooth.
Yep.
And maybe a really dynamic tight end could push them over the edge.
Yeah, I would definitely see them in the draft looking to see if I don't know that a guy like Bryce Hopkins is going to fall to them that late, but they're going to want an athletic guy, maybe even a kid out of Notre Dame who I mentioned with the Bears. Komet is one of those guys they look at, but I think that's going to matter. I think the challenge for them, and especially on the D-line is, and the edge rushers. The edge rushers are relatively thin. That is one position that's thin in free agency.
Yep.
And
they got a good one, but he costs a lot of dang gum money.
And at the age of 32, while he's going to get less than $14 million a year, probably likely somewhere else, he's probably going to get north of maybe the player he really is, only because it's thin. So the competition's going to be out there. I think that's a stress. And really, if you look at edge rushers, maybe it is like an Epineza because his stock fell a little bit after the combine, and maybe they can get a value pick there. Of course, though, then there's that concern is why did his stock fall at the combine?
Right.
So you got to have a lot good with interviews, and you got to have a lot of faith in the game tape you get out of him. But I think they're a team. I'd say their window is shutting probably faster than the Bears, only because while I think they have a better quarterback situation, certainly they only got one more year, and then they got to make a decision. Do they have to draft the next guy?
Yeah.
Do they really have to start looking at second rounder? Do they have to hope that like a Jordan Love or somebody falls that's got a name, or are you going to go after like an Eason or what? They got to start preparing for the future. So I don't think they have a lot of needs, but their needs could be really glaring.
Let's run down some of the free agents of note. We already mentioned Griffin. Trey Waynes, you touched on. Yep. He's their corner. Much cheaper, good corner. Somebody that, I think based on this conversation, the guy they could look to try to re-sign.
Yep.
Anthony Harris at strong safety. That's another good player that, I would try to re-sign.
I mean, you got to remember, they have one of the best safeties back there in Harrison Smith.
Yeah.
And kind of like what the Bears ran through with Eddie Jackson, having the right type of pairing matters. This is a team that brought back another guy to mention on here is Zendejo, and he went to Philadelphia, was a complete nightmare. The guy's always got penalty problems because he takes cheap shots. They brought him back, but he's old too, so I agree with you. I think Anthony Harris might have to be a priority.
I don't think they'll re-sign Zendejo.
No, me neither.
I love my boy Mackenzie Alexander at corner out of Clemson. I think he's good, and he's young. He's 26, but he's not great. He's not a shutdown corner like he was in college.
But probably getting a raise, though. He's only at $1 million a year in cap hit.
So they could re-sign him. You mentioned kicker situation, kicker Dan Bailey and punter Britton Colquitt. I mean, they're not expensive, so for all intents and purposes, they probably want to bring them back.
Yeah, and for the last 2 years, you've seen the kicker carousel blow up in every team's face.
Yeah, and you don't want that situation.
Yep.
Backup quarterback Sean Mannion is on the chopping block. I don't know who else do they have back there. Do you know? I can't think of it.
I think he's the guy. I think.
But you could probably find someone else to come in and take his place because he's not like Mannion's not an established backup quarterback. Let's see who else they got. We talked the other day about retread Amir Abdullah at running back. They'll probably that's nobody I think they necessarily have to focus on.
But he played pretty well for them in the little bit of time where Dalvin was down.
That's right.
So, but it's all about the cost.
But you got Dalvin Cook, and then you got the other kid behind him. What the heck's his name?
Mackenzie. It's McSomething.
Yeah, McNuggets.
Yep.
Let's see. Brett Jones, 29, center at Alabama. I mean, that's a guy I think you want to try to re-sign because he's on the lower level of the pay scale, and obviously he'll probably get a bump. But, your center is important. Laquan Treadwell, first-round pick at Ole Miss several years ago, has been complete bust. I don't see them.
Well, they cut him last year, and the only reason they brought him back is when Thielen got hurt.
Thielen got hurt, so I don't anticipate them bringing him back. Looking down the rest of the list, you got a guy like Sherrills, who is a backup corner, very dynamic in the punt return, but I don't know how much that's worth for them. Jaron Kearse, another Clemson guy at safety, 26. They could bring. He's good. He's a good player. They could bring him back too. If they didn't, I would love to go after a guy like that because he's young, he's inexpensive, and you might have something. He's tall. He hits. I like Jaron. He's fast. He did okay with them in his time. So that kind of goes through the list for the most part that we, of guys on that team that are free agents, where we think what we think that Minnesota will do in terms of re-signing them or not. But that kind of also gives you an idea of what they need to do in free agency in the draft. I mean, we've gone through several of these teams, and really I've identified just a few guys from each free agency list that we've seen the teams said the team should probably re-sign. This one, I look at it, I'm like, man, they should try to re-sign a lot of these guys. Yeah.
I mean, the question, it's going to be the dollar amounts here. I think what would concern me if I'm Minnesota, again, I said the thin, they're probably, I think they might be better off going corner in free agency, only because it's a little bit deeper market and you might be able to sit on the sidelines for the first couple of weeks, see if maybe like a Chris Harris falls, like a third guy that's out there, or a Breland or somebody, and maybe get them on a little bit of a discount, because I think if the D-line and the tight end become their targets and they go after that in the draft, based off where they're drafting and what's going to be available, just in my mind right now, I think they're going to be have to overdraft. And
it just depends. I mean, like the tight end at 26, I said it earlier a few podcasts ago. I don't know, and as good as Komet or the other guy you said may or may not be, I don't know if this is a year where we have a need for a tight end drafted in round one.
Right, and that's my point. I'm saying is that if they have to go with one of those at 26, you might be over. And even the D end, I look at if like I said, if it's like an Epineza, that could turn out to be an overdraft in the first round. Whereas, do they go somewhere? Do they actually do best player available, even if it's not a need?
It's possible, yeah.
But then the question becomes, because you're so tight on cap, does that start to mess with your cap and force you not? I think the challenge is the DN for me.
Well, I mean, there could be a lot of relief for them if they just let Griffin walk. There could be a lot of relief. But at the same time, if they do that, then where do you go from there at your edge spot? I mean, because it's going to be so important, especially in this division, to make sure you get some pressure on the quarterback when you're playing a guy like Aaron Rodgers.
And even Detroit and their passing offense.
Yeah,
I mean Chicago, if they solve the problem, could even be diverse on offense. And let's just be honest, this was probably the second best division. It was certainly the best from a top to bottom, I think. But obviously, you had a division like the NFC West that had two elite teams in Seattle, which I think makes them the best. And you can kind of look around and make arguments over this division. But I think you're going to see it every week. You're going to bring it, and the challenging part is, with the exception of Detroit, the other three teams, their defenses are very strong. So this is going to be a competitive division, no matter what. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, the fact of the matter is again, at the top of this list, Everson Griffin, he's kind of a linchpin for this everything they're going to be doing because he is, again, we said 14.5 mil for him, and the next guy in line is Trey Waynes at 3.2. So there's an enormous drop-off there. But there's also an enormous savings potentially if they let him walk, just depending on what they do. If they're able to get someone else to come in for maybe less money, or you could get somebody maybe for the same amount of money, but that guy better be friggin' awesome and younger than 32, which Griffin is.
This would be a team I would say pay a close attention to the cuts coming up real close and see if they cut somebody with a big salary and now that becomes a need for them, but they can fill it on the cheap and then fill one of these other more obvious ones, with a higher value amount. They're gonna have to be creative. No way around it. They're gonna have to be creative. I can't say that I know all their contracts as far as who creates dead money and who doesn't.
Right. I mean, there's some DNs out there in free agency per what we see, but it doesn't seem to be as deep as some of the other positions.
Yeah, and you're getting a lot of 30-somethings.
Yeah, I mean, who is that DN? Because the defensive end nowadays could be completely different. You could have a guy that is that powerful edge rusher or that fast edge rusher, or you could have that big power guy that can just really disrupt things. Where do they go? I'm looking at this free agency board, and I'm like,
Yeah, I mean,
look at this. Kyle Van Noy, you look at Carl Nassib.
Because where they're at right now, they can't go out and make a market for Barrett, and that's assuming that he's able to hit the market without a franchise tag.
Right, and they're not going to go, you got him, you got Eric Armstead, Ngakoue, who's been tagged. I mean, these are... I don't know. Maybe something could happen there with Ngakoue. I mean, maybe they want to try to make some sort of trade with the Vikings with Griffin or something like that. Somehow find a way to,
The trade market, I think, I think that's I will say something that has changed in a positive way for the NFL. I mean, it used to be 5 years ago, and probably the previous 15 years before that. I mean, a trade in the NFL was like, you were trading used, practice balls for some practice squad guy. Yeah. Now, I mean, there's been some really elite level trades that the NFL is way more open to that, in this environment. So, this is a team I think that could be, if they're going to be active overall, that's probably how they're going to have to start to get it done.
Okay. I like it. All right. Where are we at?
We got a few more minutes left if there's anything else you want to touch on, but I don't think there's a team with a lot of needs. I think the important thing with Minnesota is just remember, this was a team they were in the divisional finals, right? And they played San Francisco, right? So, they played the team that went to the Super Bowl. They're they can be formidable.
They have to start the year with Cousins like he ended the year. Because there was all that chatter at the beginning of the year, like, what a bust, and then all of a sudden he turned it on.
Yeah.
he's got to come out from game one and be ready to rock and roll.
I will say this: Minnesota is obviously one of our enemies. I'm not a big fan of Minnesota, but I will look at them. They perpetually fail at the moment when they shouldn't. Meaning, I think, like, you look at this team, looked at the team coming in last year. I mean, this is a team that legitimately should have been right there in the Super Bowl and in the contention, so to speak. I mean, they weren't. There was nowhere where they were really weak. If you look at it on the ball, they had a running game, they had receivers, they've got a quarterback that should be able to. I mean, if Garoppolo can go to the Super Bowl, I think Cousins could, but remember that knock, like Cousins couldn't win the big game. Well, I even admitted it, somewhere around halfway through the year, he started winning those big games and started throwing for big yards. And this was with Thielen out and even some time when Dalvin Cook was gone. So he showed some things. It's just, they lay an egg. It's kind of like when they got that gift against the Saints a couple years ago. And then, what happens? They go into the next game against the Eagles, and they get absolutely manhandled.
Yeah.
And they were, man for man, they were as good as the Eagles were that year. It's just like, this is a team that I think has to figure that out. But they're really, from a talent perspective, my point is they're not that far away.
No, they're
but again,
close.
the window's going to close, though. It's
Right.
going to close. It closes on them all.
Yep.
You got to rebuild.
That's correct. So we're going to go ahead and close it on the Vikings. I don't really have much more to say about them.
They wear purple.
Yeah, well, that's okay.
Not for me.
So we're going to move on. That's it on the Vikings. We will talk Green Bay Packers next.